Hi folks, this is all the fruit, and today I want to do the most beautiful hike in all of the Cote Azur, at least that's what the locals say, to the village with the most beautiful view in all of the Cote Azur, which is perched right on top of this giant cliff over there. And of course on the way I'll try to forage the crap out of the area. We are in the middle of May, not too much to forage, but I sure gotta try. Let's start with this beautiful giant ancient carob tree. It has suffered a lot. Look at this thing, it's basically 3 meters thick. However, the original stem was probably here in the middle. It has died. Then a new stem has formed there and it was cut off. Here some younger suckers and here even younger one. Beautiful ancient tree. Gigantic. Well, it seems that the main stem was maybe on this side, because there is something missing. Yeah, I'm not even sure how old this tree is, because was it here before the railroad? The railroad cannot be much older than 100 years. And this tree sure looks older. Well, not only is it old, it also has edible fruits. Look, the ground is covered with those fruits. I've talked about the seeds a lot. The seed weighs exactly 1 carat, and that's why for thousands of years the weight of jewelry has been calculated in carob seeds. Nowadays they are standardized, but this used to be the most standard seed size they had in the ancient world. So a carat is exactly the weight of a carob seed. For thousands of years the pot was the valuable part. The seed, well, yeah, it was used to weigh valuable things, but it wasn't that valuable on its own. The pot is nice and sweet, however this one on the ground will probably be rotten. Oh no, actually this part is still good. Sweet and tart, and with a smell like dog poo, but a good taste. You can eat it out of hand, you can grind it to into a powder, you can bake it into a cake. Nowadays the seeds, which historically were too hard to easily process, are the most valuable part. They have been used to congeal liquids. For example, if you take the water which you get as refuse in the cheese production and mix it with powdered carob seeds, well, this water produces something you are able to sell as cheese too. So right now this ancient tree is making a comeback, because yeah, you can make cheap liquids into expensive gels basically with the seed. On the other side of the railroad, near this little abandoned house, is a little abandoned garden. And in this little abandoned garden is a hidden cluster of bananas. Here we are still in the subtropical part of the Cote Azur, the northernmost subtropical area in all of the world, basically frost-free. So yes, here in the foothills of the Alps, those are the foothills of the Alps, you can actually successfully grow edible bananas. However, is it worth crossing this railroad? It's a small and puny banana plant, and I don't know if there is even anything edible on it. Let's check it out. Should be a Orinoco or Topocho banana. Oh, maybe some homeless people are living in this house, but are they also harvesting the bananas? Here a small banana bunch which is already gone. Over there a bigger one, also completely gone. I don't even know if they are good bananas in May. I've only seen unripe ones. No fruit punch on this pseudostem here. There's a big pseudostem here also without any bunch. This one used to have a bunch and somebody cut it off. This one, don't even know if there was one, but no, it seems like currently there is nothing edible on this banana. Well, also the prickly pear fruits are far too young. It's not one of the species with really good fruits, but you can always munch on the nopales. Not too tasty, but a slimy green vegetable. Next problem. I'm at a dead end. The wall is like 3.5 meters tall, and I have the perfect shoes for climbing such walls. No stupid wall is gonna stop me from foraging. But now, let's see, now that I'm up here, I notice other things in this abandoned garden. Couple mandarin trees, but they've been completely harvested. A big kiwi plant. If I'm lucky, there could be some fruit surviving from last year. A grapevine. Actually, the young buds of the grapevine are quite tasty. There's more a bunch of bananas down there. But no. Except for a couple grape buds. Nothing to forage here. However, this kiwi plant is quite old. Thicker than my leg. Not gonna climb down again just to film it from below. Another bunch of bananas in a private garden. They are not even harvesting them. Look at that. See this bunch hanging down here over this pillar? There were like over 10 bananas on it, and they did not even bother to harvest them. Do they maybe have some more there? Some more bananas I can liberate? Here, another rotten bunch. Those people, they have bananas growing here. They have bananas growing as far north as edible bananas can grow, and they are not even harvesting them. What is this? Well, looks like they are not harvesting the grapefruits and sweet oranges either. Here a Ficus elastica. If you're lucky, this can give you some nice chewing gum-like sap. And here over there, well, another bunch of bananas, and there is another cluster of bananas, and there is a nice big, well, a nice normal size bunch of fruits hanging there. This thing in front is no banana, although it's called the Cameroon banana. It's Strelitzia Nicolai. And the palms around here, they're also quite edible. The super tasty queen palm. Washingtonia palm, I guess the left one is filifera, the right one is robusta. They both have edible fruits and very edible heart of palm. The spiny kapok tree there, you can use it to stuff, you can use the fruit to stuff teddy bears, but different parts of the fruit are also edible. And here a small banana cluster. One of the famous giant mansions of the Cote Azur. For hundreds of years, rich people from all over Europe have been building big mansions here, making big beautiful gardens. And that's why it's been said that this countryside, the Cote Azur, is so famous for those big mansions and big gardens and palms. The exotic plants, it's an imported countryside. This stuff over there on the mountains, that's the not natural but degraded countryside of the Cote Azur. The forested mountains over here are what's quite close to the natural countryside of the Cote Azur. But this is the countryside the Cote Azur is famous for. Mansions, parks, palms and exotic plants. Almost nothing of those things here is native. One plant I'm certainly not gonna forage is the tobacco tree. Here it's not that big, growing out of the wall, about a meter tall, but it can get 4, 5, 6 meters tall. And yes, it was introduced here to smoke. There were people smoking this blue-green tobacco species. We have a couple tobacco species naturalized in the Mediterranean, but this one is probably the most noxious and invasive one. Sarsaparilla, the favorite food of the Smurfs. I learned from the Smurfs that it is edible, and later I double-checked it with more standard literature, and yes, you are supposed to be able to eat the young leaves and shoots of some species after thorough preparation. The fruits, however, which I don't see here anyways, are not edible, and they're gonna leave the shoots alone because after the second horribly dry winter, cannot see a single young shoot. And I'm not even sure this species, Smilax aspera, is considered edible. On the other side of this little steep canyon is a big plant of the blue passion fruit. It's the most common passion fruit cultivated on the Cote Azur. It can actually grow and fruit as far north as Germany. I assume it's not very good. Don't know why it's called blue passion fruit. As you can see, the flowers, well, as you can barely see, the flowers are maybe purplish, whitish, bluish. The fruits are a bright orange color. Why didn't they call it the orange passion fruit instead? They're edible, but they lack sourness, so just the sweetness with a bit of flavor is a bit boring. But it's a cold-tolerant passion fruit. Here, I don't even know why it's the most common passion fruit in southern Europe. Almost nobody eats it. And in this climate here, they can grow a lot of much tastier passion fruit species. Here we have two very interesting native pistachio species. The proper pistachio, which you can buy as food, is quite rare here on the Cote Azur. I don't know why. I saw one yesterday in Monaco, growing together with the two wild pistachio species and probably even hybridizing. This here is Pistacia terebinthus, the turpentine tree. Although it's not impossible that it's Pistacia atlantica, but I would say it's Pistacia terebinthus. It's deciduous. The leaves smell kind of nice, like the rind of an Indian mango. Those are the tiny wild pistachios. And the turpentine smelling sap is actually the main stuff which was commercially used here. The pistachios are usually quite too small. Pistacia vera is the normal pistachio being used for the fruits. Pistacia atlantica, the fruits are also big enough to be edible. Although there are a lot of work peeling tiny pistachios. Those here are too small. So this is the deciduous turpentine tree or turpentine pistachio. And here we have the evergreen mastix, also a pistachio. Well, here by the way in the background the smaller turpentine pistachio, but this is the mastix. If the name kind of sounds familiar, well, the word masticate is basically the verb associated with this plant, because its sap was used as a chewing gum for thousands of years in the old world, like in Arabia and the Mediterranean. It's milder than the turpentine sap. I guess nobody wants to masticate turpentine, but this stuff is kind of like a nice pine resin, like a nice version of a pine resin, so totally masticable. That's why it's being called the mastix. And here, by the way, a couple sarsaparilla fruits, not ripe yet. We are in mid-May, so not many fruits to forage, but something every Italian forages in spring. Well, here not in Italy, but close enough. Something every Italian forages in spring are the young wild asparagus shoots. Well, this winter was so dry that most asparagus plants didn't send up a single shoot. But even if billions over billions of plants, of asparagus plants all over Italy sent up young shoots in March and April, it's almost impossible to forage them because millions over millions of Italians are after them. And they are so proud when after hours of hunting and completely scratching their hands in the spiny asparagus, which is growing among other spiny things, they collect a tiny bouquet, a tiny handful of asparagus shoots, barely enough for five or six mouthfuls. For them, that's still a huge success because the wild asparagus, mostly asparagus albus, but also other species are being eaten. The wild asparagus is so incredibly tasty. Funny enough, in Malta they are not foraging it, despite it growing everywhere, and it tastes horrible in Malta, so it could be another subspecies. Here in southern France, around here, Nietzsche, they basically have so much Italian or Ligurian heritage that I'm pretty sure that here they would harvest it also if the winter was less dry. After this winter, Mediterranean peoples, they harvest a lot of winter greens, but look at that. I mean, this area is even being watered, and the soil looks and the vegetation looks like in the middle of summer, not in the middle of spring. Pretty bad for agriculture, vegetation, and of course for fruits, because the first thing the plants sacrifice when they don't have enough water are the fruits. Look at those minuscule fruit trees here. A pear tree, barely a meter high, and next to it an apple tree of the same size. Beautiful. It's only flowering now in May. Usually in this climate the apples should flower in March, but that's all drought stress. It's not normal for them not to have proper leaves to flower only in May. The pears flowered weeks and weeks ago, but as you can see, not a single flower produced the fruit. I'm sure some of them were pollinated. Oh, wait, one single one produced the fruit on the whole small pear tree. Pear tree of this size is totally able to support a dozen or two of fruits, but guess the tree said, in this drought I can just try to support one fruit. Very bad, folks, very bad. When the trees start calculating that in this year's plan fruits are not included, that's a very bad sign. That means that they are really struggling. I wonder how many apples this apple tree will produce. The flowering ash is producing some type of manna. However, I've never seen manna on it. I don't even know what the manna of this thing looks like. Manna is the stuff the Jews ate in Sinai in the Bible. However, the manna they ate probably grew on a tamarisk, but around here tamarisks are quite rare, so most of the manna was being harvested from those flowering ashes. But as I said, I don't even know how they exactly did it. Here again, the different pistachios growing together. The mastics with the small evergreen leaves, the turpentine with the bigger deciduous leaves, and here a similar plant which is not closely related to them. The pistachios are in the same family as the mango. The carob up here is in the same family as the bean. But as you can see, the leaves bear a great resemblance. That's why leaves are not that good for determining the family of a plant. Yeah, beans will mostly have those tons of leaflets, but still, it is tricky to use leaves to determine a plant's family. Why is this hiking trail named after the philosopher Nietzsche? Because in his later years he used to live here, and pretty much every day it's being said he used to hike up here. And also, a lot of researchers have speculated that his philosophy, like he basically thought up and wrote down his philosophy on Zarathustra, which is not like the original Zarathustra philosophy. He just used his name for his philosophy when he walked up this trail. That's why his late philosophy is dominated by the ideas of effort and suffering. Yeah, that's because of this steep mountain trail. Here I'm still in the not so steep parts, but believe me, it's gonna get much steeper around the cliffs up there. Normally I would not expect to forage a lot of fruits around here in May. Yeah, still some citruses. May is also the peak of the loquat season that far north. Couple young mulberries. A couple early mulberry and cherry varieties, maybe even an early apricot variety. If I'm really lucky, a monstera, or if I'm really lucky, a bunch of bananas. Basically, spring in the Mediterranean and pretty much everywhere else is not fruit foraging but greens foraging season. However, look at that. Well, firstly we have a very cold spring. In mid-May I'm still with long sleeves and I'm not planning to take them off soon, even though I'm on a hot south facing slope. Well, we had the cold spring, so the early apricots and cherries and strawberries and mulberries, nope. But we also had such a dry winter that, yeah, normally I would be seeing a lot of wild leeks here, wild apiaceae like carrot and parsley relatives, a lot of wild salads which you can forage in the Mediterranean in spring. But there is nothing here, maybe a little bit along the tiny streams, but nothing on those slopes. It's very bad, folks. The second very dry winter, very bad for nature, very bad for agriculture, and of course very bad for fruits. Feral olives. The olive, one of the definitions of the Mediterranean climate is where you can successfully grow olives. To the south in the Sahara Desert it's too dry. To the east into Arabia and the Arabian and Central Asian deserts is too dry and too cold in winter. To the north it's too cold. To the west and northwest it's too wet. So wherever you can grow olives, you have the Mediterranean climate. The Romans and many medieval cultures after them tried to expand the olive cultivation into the Alps, into Germany, some say even into Britain, to the Sahara, into Central Asia. Didn't work. Wherever you can grow this thing, it's the Mediterranean climate. The other definition of the Mediterranean climate is evergreen vegetation, evergreen forests and scrublands dominated by the holm oak. I don't see a holm oak around here, but as you can see, pretty much all of the vegetation is evergreen. The pistachios, the sarsaparilla, the carob, which was also introduced to that area. Here we have, oh god, I forgot the name of this one, another evergreen Mediterranean shrub. Even the asparagus around here is evergreen. One very interesting tree which is not evergreen but summer green. Well, what is the flowering ash here in front of those palms, and to the right of the flowering ash we have the service tree, very tasty fruit which will be ripe around here maybe in August, in Germany more in September, October. So only two native-ish species around here which are deciduous, everything else is evergreen, meaning that here we are smack in the Mediterranean climate. Now, since there is not much to forage, let's talk about why we do have a Mediterranean and even a basically frost-free subtropical climate here. Well, we have a Mediterranean climate because basically everywhere around the Mediterranean Sea the climate is Mediterranean, which is not normal. Mediterranean Sea stretches thousands of kilometers into the landmass of Africa/Eurasia. Without the Mediterranean Sea we wouldn't have Mediterranean climate here, but continental, probably semi-desert climate. However, here we do not simply have Mediterranean climate, we have an almost subtropical, almost frost-free climate. Actually, some areas here haven't experienced frost throughout the 20th century. How come? Well, here the winters are a lot less harsh than in other parts of the coastline, and also the summers are a lot less hot. Well, The Mediterranean Sea works as an air conditioner. In winter, it releases heat and dampens the frosty spikes. In summer, it swallows heat and releases humidity. But the Mediterranean Sea, we also have it to the west, around Marseille, and to the east, around Genova. And both really don't have subtropical stuff. Yeah, they have the standard Mediterranean stuff, but only the standard, nothing subtropical. But here, you saw bananas. Later, when we walk through the village up there, actually down there at the coastal village, you would have even seen a lot more tropical stuff. Maybe some mangoes, maybe some other tropical fruit trees. Why do we have a subtropical, basically frost-free climate in this area? Well, first part is the Mediterranean Sea, the other part are the Alps. Actually, the Alps, even without the Mediterranean Sea, in southern Switzerland and northern Italy, with the big Italian lakes, they also managed to have something like a subtropical-ish climate. Colder than here, but still amazing. Why? Because the Alps protect you from the northern wind and they reflect the sun which comes from the south, and they basically stop the warm winds which come from the south, but they protect you from the northern wind. Around here in Provence, the northern wind is called Mistral. It's a horrible wind. Even in summer it can really chill you out, and in winter it can even bring ice to the shores of the Mediterranean, or it could be for climate change. But here the Mediterranean and the Alps meet. In between there is just a tiny strip of land. Look at that, and people are living even on the steep hills. But this tiny strip of land, just for about 40, maybe 50 kilometers, 25 kilometers on the Italian side, 25 kilometers on the French / Monaco side, we have the northernmost subtropical climate pocket, climate island in the world. If you know another place that's subtropical, that far north, anywhere in the world, please tell me. I want to go and visit it. Because look at all those palms down there. Washingtonia from the deserts of Arizona and Mexico. Phoenix stactulifera, the date palm, from the deserts of Africa and Arabia. The queen palm, where did it come from? From the Caribbean or something like that? It's also some subtropical thing. Those things, they don't really grow much further north than here. And it's not even normal that they all can grow that well, that far north. This is a miracle of nature. The European dwarf palm, Chamerops humilis. The only palm species native to the European mainland. You might be used to seeing lots and lots of different palms on the Cote Azur. Actually, the biggest palm collection in continental Europe is on the Italian side, less than 25 kilometers from the French border. The Italian part of the area is called Riviera. However, all those dozens of palm species, they've been introduced from other continents, and there are thousands more palm species which will not even grow in the subtropics. They have to grow in the equatorial tropics. But this year, if you think this palm has been planted or even has escaped, nope, this one is native. It's the northernmost naturally occurring palm species in the world. It's the palm species which occurs by a very wide margin further north than any other one. The European dwarf palm. Yeah, it doesn't grow to very huge sizes, partially because of the climate, but it can survive here. At the same geographical latitude as southern Canada, we have native palm stands here. If we compare this with the US, I think the northernmost palm populations there are where in Florida and California / Arizona. I don't think this stuff grows much further north. However, here it grows all the way to the same latitude as Chicago or Montreal or Quebec. It's amazing. It's not a very tasty palm. Maybe there would be some edible fruits on it right now, but getting through it through the spiny muck here will cost me couple square inches of skin, and I don't want to do this. But I'm really humbled to see a palm, a member of a really tropical plant family, growing at the same geographical latitude as Canada, growing on the southern slopes of the Alps. Not that it's so much more amazing than pistachios and olives and carrots growing at the same geographical latitude as southern Canada, but at least those just look like evergreen trees and shrubs. Well, the palms, they have such a distinctly tropical appearance, and they are 99% tropical species. Yeah, with very few notable exceptions, the most extreme and noteworthy of which is the tiny European dwarf palm. Something extremely interesting about the olive, well, there are thousands of extremely interesting things about the olive, is that it occurs in a lot of different forms and subspecies. This one is basically Olea europea, subspecies europea, the cultivated olive. Although those here have become feral. There were fires here because I don't see a single old tree here. So those could be from the rootstocks on which some ancient olives were grafted hundreds of years ago. This could be the rootstock. If they were not grafted, this could be just the root of the not grafted olive. However, the plant growing quite tall, and those springy branches, that identifies it as as basically a form of the cultivated olive. It has reverted a lot towards the wild state. It will probably produce very few fruits, and they will be very small and barely worth foraging. But still, this one, everybody would say, this is the cultivated olive. However, here on this side, I saw something which totally looks like a wild olive. Olea europea, subspecies oleaster. Can you see it? Can you see the difference? Small plant, very short branches. The leaves are shorter. The branches are much more stiff, not so springy. They are much more stiff because they are shorter. Everything is shorter. Even a lot of them, they produce something like spines when the young branches die back. They are so hard, olive wood is extremely hard, that they basically act like spines to prevent foraging from hungry goats and other animals. Well, we are 99% sure that the olive is not native to this area. Then why do we get wild olives here? This one we can explain, They planted olives here, they probably grafted them on some really primitive varieties, or in even earlier times where they did not even graft them, they just planted some stuff and harvested the kind of primitive fruits of the ungrafted trees, and then the stuff turned feral and so on, a relic of cultivation or a seedling of those old cultivated olives. But what's this? Thousands of kilometers away from the original distribution of olives. Well, the theory is, just like with apples or plums or other things, that if you have a nice big apple, well, let me see, I have a nice big apple somewhere. Should have thought that I'm going to talk about such stuff and should have taken out the apple. Well, it's never too late. A nice golden delicious. Yeah, folks, when it comes to apples, I'm a horribly boring guy. I prefer golden delicious to all those ancient local varieties. If I eat this apple, of course I'll take the label with me, but I'll throw the rest into the macchia. And if we have a really wet year, the seeds might actually grow into real apple trees. But those will never produce golden delicious, because golden delicious will come only from trees grafted from branches of a golden delicious tree. They don't come from seeds of the golden delicious. It will be some apple which will not be exactly a crab apple, but a kind of usually kind of a primitive apple cultivar. Similar things happens to olives. When the birds eat the olives and spread the seeds, a lot of those seeds will revert back to something which so closely resembles the wild olive that you would basically need genetic molecular studies to determine whether olives have been native to this area or brought by people, and stuff which people have used and cultivated and eaten for thousands of years. Even genetics usually fail to give you a clear picture. So this year we are pretty sure, unlike the dwarf palm, the olive is not native to those slopes, but probably it was introduced here 2,000 to 3,000 years ago and became naturalized. And since the climate is totally Mediterranean, those naturalized olives grow quite well here. Sorry folks for not showing you a lot of edible stuff, but as you can see, there are neither edible fruits nor edible veggies here. I could show you all the nice spices. Rosemary, a very common plant in the Mediterranean back here. Very nice spice. I should bring some of it home. But it's also very drought tolerant, unlike a lot of other plants which didn't even bother to show up this spring. Prickly pear is invasive on those slopes, although theoretically you could call the olive which is dominating those slopes invasive. Just came here a couple thousand years before the prickly pear. Prickly pears are forming a lot of young fruits, but I'm afraid if the drought continues they will just drop them. But as you can see, they are struggling here. Small plants clinging to the rock, producing a couple fruits, but even the cacti are not doing too well. I guess this is a wild Mediterranean rose. Beautiful. Growing pretty much like a vine, like a bramble. I forgot those names because I studied all those things 20 years ago. What was the name of this rose species? I surveyed this thing in Malta. Well, as I said, very beautiful, very vine-like, growing to many meters, like a bramble. Here a couple more. Not flowering or fruiting because of the drought. Right next to it a Pittosporum tobira with very sticky fruits. Basically, if birds land here, the fruits, the glue from the fruit sticks to their legs or to their beak if they try to eat the stuff, and thus they disperse the seeds. I think you can also prepare a kind of bird glue from this, and then it's so strong that you can even catch birds. But don't cite me on this, I'm not exactly sure it's this exact plant. Here you can see the service tree leaves from nearby. It's a close relative of the rowan, but has much bigger fruits and a much tougher wood. Maybe we can see some flowers around there. Also, do you notice something here? The Mediterranean vegetation is being replaced by summer green vegetation. There are elms here. Yes, here are the fruits of the elm. I'm really surprised to see them here, but you can recognize them by the fruits. There are also a lot of those flowering ashes here. They are competing successfully with the evergreen Mediterranean vegetation. That can mean several things, and probably it means all of them. Firstly, there is better soil here. You can see there were agricultural terraces here. So, trees which like more nutrients and more water can grow here. Secondly, this place is not really facing south. This area is facing south, and there is not that much ash here. This place is facing west. The winds come from the west, so the rain comes from the west. And also it's possible that far north, look at that, up there is a north-facing slope, and near the gully, that's another reason there might be cold air flowing down the gully. Near the gully, you can also see a dominance of summer green trees. while on the more exposed rocks, the trees and shrubs are all evergreen. So summer green trees here in this area where the Mediterranean / subtropical climate is only on a very narrow, only in a very narrow strip near the sea. Wherever you get a little bit more cold, a little bit more moisture, and a little bit more soil, suddenly summer green things start getting competitive. I didn't expect to find that far down. We should be at about 300 meters above sea level. I guess I expected this a little bit higher, but let's see, do they say something about those old terraces? Nope, they just say that this is the trail of Nietzsche. 6,000 feet above man and time? Ah, come on, Nietzsche. It's a bit more over 1,500 feet. Don't be such a pussy. I'm actually a little bit surprised. The trail is basically from Nietzsche's philosophy. I thought that this trail would be some really crazy, horrible climb. But it's kind of relaxing. Here you have a service tree. The rowan-like leaves and the buds. One of them had hairy buds, one of them had sticky buds. Yeah, I know how funny that sounds, but that's how you recognize rowan from service tree. However, while the service tree can grow in the harshest Mediterranean climates, the rowan can grow in the Alps even above the tree line. So here it cannot really be rowan, it must be service tree. Relic of cultivation. This was a very popular fruit tree for thousands of years in this area. The polypodium fern. A fern which in hot and dry weather drops its leaves. Even happens sometimes when in Germany April is really hot and dry. The leaves will die and come back after rains in May or June. Those leaves here have survived the winter. Why? There must be, okay, the Mediterranean species are of course more drought tolerant, but still, I guess there must be some water flowing down here somewhere. A little underground trickle, enough to preserve those leaves. They're quite interesting because polypodium has a compound inside which is much more sweet than sugar without having calories. I think for some reasons, either it was difficult to process or it was not very healthy. It's not being used as a sugar substitute. Maybe you can research it and write in the comments why this stuff has not taken over the zero Coke market yet. Tiny bit more flowers and grass on the ground. That means less heat, less sun, more moisture. Here of course we have a bit more shade. Also, yeah, 300 meters, some slight climatic differences should already be felt. Maybe there is more dew here than in the lower areas. And also maybe this area caught a bit more rain. The differences are very slight, but maybe we'll be able to forage some spring greens. Here you can see how they foraged asparagus in previous years. Broke off those things near the ground. That's how you forage this, and as I said, every Italian and probably also people in this area near Italy are doing this. Here are some wild leeks, already a little bit old for foraging them, but you could forage the flower, the young bulbs, maybe parts of the leaves. Some parts will be too tough and old, but at least up here there are some spring greens. Of course, this is not gonna save you from starvation. The amount is too small, but in thousands of years of droughts and famines and wars and stuff, the Mediterranean people have learned to utilize every little wild plant. Well, radunculus, this one you leave alone, this is toxic. This one you don't forage. Here this asparagus even managed to produce 2 young shoots this spring. 2 is not a lot for an asparagus plant, but it's still impressive. And the third one kind of No, this is an old one. I thought it's a withered one, like the ones I saw in other places in this area. Not enough water to keep all alive. But no, this is neither withered nor foraged, it's an old one. But at least up here, more moisture. Two young stems from this asparagus plant this year. Here again, evergreen stuff on the slope. Summer green stuff in the well, kind of valley like that. Here somebody has built stuff, maybe something around the garden. Interesting. Also the pine trees. Most Mediterranean nations, like the rest of Europe and much of the rest of the world, planted billions of pines throughout the 20th century. Well, the first reason was they wanted to produce and export timber, although pine timber is not really that good. Second one, social peace. They wanted to give all those jobless farmers some money. Third one, they thought, well, forests are good, right? They will produce soil and retain the water. However, pines in the Mediterranean naturally usually don't grow on those dry limestone slopes. They grow on the just as dry maritime sand dunes. When they planted them on the sand dunes and maritime swamps, they planted eucalyptus, which dried them out and destroyed the hydrology of those areas. And here on those slopes, they planted pines, which also further dried up the slopes and destroyed the hydrology of those areas. They will never harvest any timber from those areas, but the pine competes with the natural vegetation and destroys basically the water reserves of the area. And here, interesting enough, finally I see some holm oak. Maybe the lower slopes were just too hot and too dry for it. It's possible here. But up here, the classic Mediterranean vegetation, that means it's still not too cold up here. So those summer green things in the small depressions are basically more about less sun and more nutrients and more water than about climate. Ruta graveolens, a close relative of citrus fruit, which is native to that area. Don't touch it, it will give you a sunburn. And also, well, especially the Greeks, they like to put this stuff and also pine resin into their wine. That's why Greek wines never became as popular as French or Italian or Spanish ones, because nobody except for the Greeks likes the taste too much. Here a very interesting little tree, the Mediterranean tree spurge. It's very interesting for several reasons. It's basically the link between the temperate climate spurges in Europe, which are basically small herbs, and the spurges in Africa, which are trees or even cactus-like columnar plants. This one grows in the Mediterranean, and yeah, it can produce tree-like structures. This is about 2 meters tall, that's the average height, but they can get over 4 meters in extreme cases. Well, it has a lot of funny features. First one, it's deciduous. It loses its leaves in winter. Here we have the old leaves from last year. Drought came too fast, so it lost them so quickly it couldn't even lose them properly. They basically died on the plant instead of being drained of nutrients properly. And those are the young leaves which came up in this spring. As you can see, very meager young leaves, because after 2 years of winter drought, even the succulent stems of the tree spurge are kind of being being depleted of water. But wait, why is this thing deciduous in that way, that it has leaves in the dry season but no leaves in the wet season? It would make sense the opposite way. Like spurges in the Canary Islands, they get their leaves in after the autumn rain, and then they lose them when everything gets dry in spring and summer. This one gets its leaves towards the end of the spring rain and then keeps them throughout the hot summer. Doesn't make that much sense. Well, maybe because it's growing in a much colder climate than many of those African spurges, but it grows only in the hottest Mediterranean climate. It grows only in the really 100% Mediterranean climate. Actually, even in southern Italy, you almost never see it more than 2-3 kilometers away from the sea, and even like 1 or 2 kilometers away from the sea, you see it only in very sheltered, protected, southern-facing slopes. You know what that tells us? That up here, at the southern slopes of the Alps, at the same geographical latitude as southern Canada, even about 300 meters above the sea, we still have really, really Mediterranean climate. Not like climate some people call Mediterranean, like in Tuscany or in Rome. That's not really Mediterranean. Rome doesn't really have a Mediterranean climate. Tuscany doesn't really have a Mediterranean climate. 80% of southern Italy doesn't really have a Mediterranean climate. But here, the Alps, alpine climate, freezing mountain climate on the southern slopes of the Alps, the same geographical latitude of southern Canada. This tree, even more than the olives and the oaks, which can stand, and even the pistachios, which can stand a lot of frost. This thing here, this cannot stand basically any frost. If this thing grows here, then this climate is Mediterranean without any caveats. Basically, the climate is totally 100% Mediterranean, period. Here you can again see the two types of olive growing right next to each other. Feral / relic of cultivation rootstock olive, and olive which looks basically like traditional wild olive. Olea europea var europea and Olea europea var oleaster. However, in this case, can you really call them varieties when they are basically results of the same genetic hodgepodge of the cross-pollination around here? Look at this. This one really even produces kind of spines to save itself from the hungry goats. A Saskatoon. Yeah, there is actually a Saskatoon species in Europe, and it can even grow in those hot Mediterranean climates. Amelanthia ovalis, the oval leaf Saskatoon. Beautiful. I wonder why all the branches are missing. They're not missing on the other plants. So I think because this plant has particularly tasty branches, that they have not been cleared away for the trail. I think they have been eaten by the hungry goats. Yeah, Saskatoon berries and Saskatoon flowers are quite tasty, and I can imagine that for goats the branches are also quite tasty. This would be a good thing to forage. Actually, not too early. I think about June. And in a very hot year, maybe even in May. But not in this cold and dry year, and not after the goats have been at it. So here we have the evergreen holm oak, Quercus ilex, from close up. This is the definition of native vegetation of the Mediterranean climate. Well, on the other side of this ravine, we have a small gully or wash, which has holm oaks, but also really old specimens of some deciduous oak, maybe Quercus pubescens, I'm not sure. Basically, this means sub-Mediterranean climate. And in areas in southern Italy where there are really low hills, rolling landscapes, 5 or 10 meter difference in elevation can actually make the difference between the evergreen holm oak and every part of the countryside which is 10 meters higher will have summer green Quercus pubescens and other oaks. Does that mean that this wash over there is not Mediterranean anymore? No, in this case I don't think it's a climatic thing, especially since there are also big holm oaks in this wash. Basically, the summer green oaks grow here because there is water seeping down there, at least underground water even in summer, because yeah, it wouldn't make sense for a summer green tree to grow on those exposed rocks where you make leaves, all your leaves in spring. Well, this is also making leaves in spring, but it still has leaves from last year. When you make all your leaves in spring at the end of the winter rains that maintain them through the rainless summer, it only makes sense for them in this climate down there in the gully where there is some water even in summer. So in this case, yeah, those oaks on the first glance might mean that up here the climate is not really Mediterranean anymore, but in this case it's actually not the cold that makes the summer green oak dominant inside this gully, but it's the water. Because look at it, 10 meters right of it there is the tree spurge, which would grow only in the most Mediterranean climate. If this spurge grows here, now we are at almost 400 meters above sea level. That means that the climate here is still super Mediterranean. But since the summer green oaks grow here, that means that we also have a decent amount of water coming down this wash. Probably more than is coming down the big main wash, because it has only single oaks, only single deciduous oaks, while this small one here sports a lot of them. Also, folks, I know that most of you expect and hope that I'm gonna be foraging lots of tasty fruits left and right, but yeah, the combination of May, basically the worst month for fruits in this area, and the very cold spring, which is making it even worse for fruits, and of course the dry winter, which is making it even worse. Yeah, they caused me to make just foraging videos, and sometimes even the foraging videos, oh look at this barbed wire, that's some crazy barbed wire fence. And even the foraging videos like this one, I haven't actually eaten anything proper yet. But you know how many really new species videos I've made here in the northernmost subtropical region in the world, full of world famous botanic gardens, which I all plundered as far as I could. You know how many new species videos I made in 1 week here? Normally I would make like over 100 in such an area. Guess how many I made? One single species, and the species wasn't even new for me, just the ripe fruits were new. So folks, you gotta take those foraging videos where I don't forage basically anything, and you gotta like it, or you can go and watch somebody else. Those Frenchies are surprisingly civilized, except for the countless toilet papers. This is the first big piece of trash I'm finding after 3 kilometers. Well, one man's trash is another man's, well, stuff you collect to throw away. Anyways, I guess as soon as I praised the frogs, found 2 more pieces of trash. By the way, all those oaks, they are not just important to determine climate, they have been an important staple of people all around the world. Well, if you go to the equatorial rainforest, it's not the genus Quercus, but other similar genera in the Fagaceae. They've been an important staple for humans pretty much all around the world. Yeah, you need to heat them to remove the toxins, you need to leach the acorns out for several days to remove the bitterness. But if you're in a survival situation, or a situation of war or something where you have to run into the hills, or especially if you are a forager who doesn't have an orchard or a cornfield, well, having to leach out the oaks for the acorns for a couple of days is a lot less work than having to farm for years or for decades before you have a walnut or chestnut tree ready for harvesting. Of course, chestnuts were foraged even with more pleasure than the oaks. And even today, in the Mediterranean, those oaks are a staple of the people. Yeah, they are still feeding millions of people. Well, not so much directly. There are a couple of remote areas where you can find acorn bread and acorn acorn cakes and things, but no, they put them through the pigs, through the wild boars, and in some areas, especially in Spain and Portugal, but also in parts of Italy, Greece and southern France, they feed millions of pigs on them. And then you buy the hams of those pigs for incredible prices because they are free-roaming acorn-fed pigs. So incredibly enough, but acorns are still an incredibly important, commercially heavyweight staple of southern European foraging. There must be literally millions of pigs, especially in Spain, which are being fed mostly on this and similar species throughout the autumn, and only then gain the weight necessary to unfortunately slaughter them. Speaking of chestnuts, in the forests of the Mediterranean mountains and of the sub-Mediterranean climate, actually chestnuts were always more important than corn, especially on the islands of Sardinia and Corsica, which, well, on very clear days you can see from the mountains. Here you can see at least Corsica. Well, people were basically almost not growing any corn. They were subsiding for thousands of years on the chestnuts. This goes all the way into central France and even southwestern Germany. Chestnuts being an incredibly important nut for subsistence. They're not real nuts. Even in Heidelberg, they didn't cut down the chestnut forests above the city and the castle. I mean Heidelberg, Germany. And thus everything was burned down because the enemies could sneak into the city through the chestnut forests. They are that important. So why didn't we see any chestnuts here? Well, firstly, we are still in a very hot, dry area. Chestnuts, as I said, are more common in Mediterranean mountains. Actually, the Ligurian mountains are among the most famous areas where people survived on chestnuts for thousands of years. Also, chestnuts don't like limestone. If the limestone is very hard or the rain is very strong, they can grow on limestone rock. But down here, I would say too much lime in the soil. The pH is too high. And so I don't expect any chestnuts here. So if you want something chestnut-like, you have to subside on acorns. Before the forests were cut down here large swaths of Italian forests were cut down during the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. Before that, the area was much more rich in water. Look, there was a water mill here, and now there is not even a trickle of water. Well, similar situation we have in Germany. We also have water mills at creeks which are now far too small to support them. But here we have a water mill in an area which is now completely dried out. Not even a trace, not even a trickle of water, not even moisture, not even, well, the oaks are a little bit taller, showing more moisture, but apart from that, almost nothing. That's how, in what a crazy way, humans changed the climate. And of course, with the climate, they also changed the availability of fruits. Oh, wait a moment. Okay, I'm taking part of it back. Everything I said is basically correct, but in this case, there is still a trickle of water. Not enough to support the water mill anymore, but look at that beauty. All the stuff in the center are limestone formations, like in a cave, but here they grow even faster because the moss makes them grow faster. Well, but still, this trickle in a creek that used to support a water mill, this trickle in May is pathetic. But yeah, this moss basically makes limestone, well, precipitate on the little moss streamlets, basically turning them slowly into stone and creating those giant structures. So that's why the water mill is right here. This is maybe the third or fourth time in a week I've seen flowing water. Not good, folks, not good for May. But at least it's nice and clean water. I won't drink it, but there are settlements and roads further up, and I'm sure some toilets drain into this creek. However, wait, there is something forageable here. And it's a very interesting thing. It's the black nightshade. Worldwide wheat nowadays. The funny thing is, in Asia, people would eat the tiny tomato-like fruit. Those ones are not sweet at all because no sun here. They are mostly sour, but also umami. Tastes like a sour tomato. Yeah. Asian cultures will eat the fruits. Europeans will say this is toxic. Africans, however, a lot of African cultures will not eat the fruits. They will use the bitter leaves for spinach, for a spinach-like vegetable. A lot of non-European cultures actually like bitter food. For us, bitter food is horrible, but Asians, Australians, Native Americans and Africans, a lot of their traditional cultures like bitter stuff. But ain't that so funny? The Asians, most of the Asian cultures I know just eat the fruits. Most of the African countries, and I have a very limited experience with them, but I've seen them foraging this stuff, they eat only the leaves. And for the Europeans it's just a noxious weed, and they tell their children to stay away from it because it will kill them. Well, talking about the millet water, I forgot to check this quite big white mulberry. No, it's not one of the modern early varieties. The fruits are still green. And also I guess the original stem is gone. Also, I don't think it was planted here that close to the water basins because its root would destroy them. But in a couple of weeks here you could eat some tasty mulberries. Well, rain coming. Here to the right of it, a walnut tree. So you see, as soon as we have water, you have stuff like mulberries, walnuts and other things you can grow. Arriving at the mountain part of the beautiful medieval town of Etsi, no idea how to pronounce it, but this is a cherry plum edible. No matter what all the Westerners tell you, every German will tell you that you'll die if you eat only one of the cherries. Not true. When they are fully ripe, they're actually quite okay. Sometimes even the seeds are edible. Feral fig growing out of the cliffs. Figs are not native here, so what you would call wild figs around here. The fruits of each shrub or tree are different. They are basically, a mixture of all the different cross-pollinated varieties which have been introduced here. We have green ones, red ones, pink ones, blue ones. You have small ones, big ones, long ones, thick ones, and so on. But most of them are quite tasty. Of course not all, because those hybrids have not been selected for taste yet. But it's worth tasting each one. About every second one will be totally worth foraging. And actually, when I travel around here in August or September, I hardly buy stuff at supermarkets or restaurants because I get most of my sustenance, just like the antique people of the Mediterranean, from the tasty figs. Another Mediterranean staple is the tasty stone pine or domestic pine. Horribly expensive when you buy them in supermarkets or shops, mostly because they are so tall and so difficult to collect, but also because they are so difficult to process. But here I'm standing on a tall cliff. Look at that, the season is starting. This is a tiny one. They can get like 6 or 7 times the weight of this. Oops. And come on, where are the stones? Those are tiny. I wonder if they will even have anything edible inside. Nope. 2 winters of drought, and even the stone pines have... this one might. Nope. 2 years of drought, and even the stone pines, which are totally used to the Mediterranean climate, stopped producing. It's one of the most iconic... Oopsala. Hello, iconic little dove. If those were fruits, they would be some of the most interesting ones in the world. This thing got me. This thing got me a very good, very good zoology grade on my exam, because I knew a lot more about it than the professor. One of the most historic and religiously controversial birds in the world. But the stone pine, yeah, beautiful ornamental, one of the most iconic trees of the Mediterranean, important staple for thousands of years. In Italy I've still seen commercial stone pine collection. Don't know if they still do it in France. Labor has become very expensive here decades ago. I guess they stopped. Let's see if they have stone pine seeds over there. If they have local Mediterranean produce, local honey, local sweets, almonds, peanuts, other nuts, but no pine nuts. It's a pity they don't have pine nuts here. Guess they are not that easy to get around here for acceptable prices anymore. Sorry? It's raining! And you're on YouTube! Smile! Wanna be on YouTube? Okay folks, tell me, who is painting their plants green? They already... Huh? Your boss is planting the plant green, but it is already green. Why is he painting it green?
No, it's not painting, it's real green.
Ah, so your boss does this on purpose? Huh?
He was paint.
Uh-huh. By the way, this is gonna get on YouTube, so...
I will tell you.
So your boss was painting, yes?
He was dying,
Uh-huh.
so we painted for be more real and
Ah,
not
for
dying.
protection, this part here is dying.
No. He was dying,
Yes.
so we just paint it, but he's still alive.
Ah, you thought when it's dead, it's gonna be ugly, so you want it to be beautiful and still green, but the plant liked the paint so much that it survived.
Exactly.
Hey, great job, man. Thank you so much for the... Ah, by the way, les cactus, ça ce n'est pas un cactus.
C'est un cactus.
Non, ce n'est pas. Ça ce n'est pas un cactus. C'est une euphorbia. C'est une plante très différente des cactus, mais ça paraît au cactus. Ça, on ne peut pas manger les fruits. Les fruits de cactus, ça se mange. Ça, c'est joli, mais c'est très vénéneux. Si on les coupe, les jus, c'est blanc et c'est très dangereux. Si tu les coupes, tu vas et tu laves ta main, tu ne touches pas les yeux, ok? Très dangereux, c'est Lillois. Ok? Ok? Merci beaucoup, au revoir. I love those tiny medieval villages with their winding, can you even call this a road? It's a stair. And even here, get a beautiful fig tree, and in a couple months, salut! In a couple months those tasty big fruits will be ripe, and somebody, but not me unfortunately, is gonna eat them. I love this architecture, and unlike the birch at the cactus bar, those are true cacti. And if they have fruits, those fruits will be delicious, but right now I don't even see flowers. Even the cacti are suffering from the drought. Arterocyssus trichospidata in East Asia, where they don't have good maple, for maple syrup, they used to tap this wine for the syrup. They did not make wine from the berries, which are small and rich in oxalate. They made wine from the sap of the stem, which is extremely prolific. You cut this, you cannot use this little rod for the next weeks or months because it will be full of slippery, smelly, fermenting wine sap. The reason I'm coming here is the exotic garden, but this will be a separate video. Let's see what we can find here. Black locust. Very invasive, very toxic, except for the flowers. The flowers are delicious, but unfortunately I'm too short to get them here. By the way, in this cold mountain village with all the overdressed Frenchmen, overdressed posh Frenchmen behind me, because the prices here are so high that normal people don't even need to show up. I'm a little bit, out of place, but I think I've kind of become one of the attractions of the village. Almonds, another staple of the Mediterranean for thousands of years. They grow better in the Mediterranean climate than walnuts, which need a lot of air, which need a lot of water, or hazelnuts, which grow better in mountainous areas. So the almonds, and they're incredibly versatile. You can make sweets from them, you can make milk from them. Actually, if you think that almond milk is an invention of the vegans and yuppies, it's not true. Almond milk was actually one of the more commonly drunk types of milk, even throughout the Middle Ages, because, well, the goats and cows were not producing constantly, but you could always soak a couple almonds and make nice almond milk. Yeah, goats and cows were producing very little milk in antiquity and the Middle Ages, and this almond is producing nothing, but okay. It's May, and the young almonds are already on the tree and are already totally edible as a green fruit, not as a nut. And the old ones, I'm sure when I harvest them, more than half of them will still be good. But the one I found on the ground, unfortunately, was rotten. But the almond is a tree that can basically kind of feed you a little bit if you are lucky in all 12 months of the year. Now look at this beautiful old white mulberry. Look at its size, and it's still being maintained and pruned, and it's been supported by this huge metal support. They were introduced here for the production of silkworms. The fruits were actually a byproduct, and so was the incredibly tough timber, but mostly they were used for their leaves, which were fed to the silkworms, which then produced the silk. But yeah, they are still throughout the Mediterranean and sub-Mediterranean areas of Europe ancient trees. This one is not that ancient, but I would say that it has like 100 years. Beautiful old tree, and look at that, lots of sugar producing polypodium up there as epiphytes. The European dwarf palm, here a good sized specimen of over 2 meters. Male one, I would say. Lots of old flowers but no fruits. Male specimen. Beautiful. As I said, it is actually native to this area. The only palm that can grow that far north, basically at the same geographical latitude as southern Canada. Pardon? Ah, vous voulez un t-shirt? Okay, okay. Tout de suite, je prends un t-shirt.